now's the time that we really need to understand, and work together as a community. And I think, from what Wilson's kind of just roadmapped in there, I think we're in a really strong position. And I didn't really want to, but I'm going to, because I can't help myself. But I'm going to switch back to the board, because I want the input from Wilson around, what are we missing out of this picture? So we've got the this kind of security piece down in the bottom corner, and actually I'm going to add in incident management here. But what's missing out of this picture to make it possible? I've added Splunk in there. I've got Perfecto on the mobile devices, but this is a really complex landscape. And I know Anna's here as well from ASG and joined us. But we've got data quality, which is a difficult one around kind of contract testing, around how you deal with payloads in real world, like negative tests. I gave the example with Apple taking duplicate payments off me yesterday after I ordered straight as the App Store came back up, which I know is my own fault. But part of it is this is a really complex landscape. I'm going to start with Wilson. What tips? How do you even start with something like site reliability engineering?
Well, I think it's the future is bright, and for one reason, it has to do with Todd's company, which is this open telemetry. I think is going to revolutionize the whole situation, because now we can have developers focusing in on the application level coding and not have to include all of the retries and all of the security keeping. So that way you have another group who has when they run in Kubernetes as a sidecar, that they would put automatically in each of the applications running in Kubernetes, and that will take care of all that stuff, and it will have this whole data plane that it will work with, and then would have tracing in it automatically. It's a brave new world, and I think with the service mesh implementation, it's going to be really changing the industry because of that. So, and the nice thing is, because all they have to do is just put one line in their code, and everything else will be hunky-dory. Is that right, Todd? So, yeah, it's not just a pipe dream, but it's happening, right?
It's Paul here. I wanted to just jump in on one other thing. Is that something that kind of brought to my mind with when I was watching Anna talk about security. I had an opportunity to work for about 2 weeks with a company called Zero North out of Boston, and what they do is intrusion tool orchestration. So if you guys know of tools like Nikto and Zap, they basically take those tools and kind of try to do intrusion testings to your websites to check the security and the impermeability of that. And you can also compare them, like, do I have an open source tool, and is it working as good as something that I might pay for, or is the paid one not quite as good as what I'm looking for? And they give you they have like about 8 different tools that they do that with, and can give you a full array of where your vulnerability is at and what tools are going to find it. That's all I wanted to throw in there.
Excellent. I think that's a good point. I'm going to kind of loop it back and take this pause opportunity for me to play the clip which Todd gave me. So I apologize if it's a bit jumpy. But we talked about 5G, and we talked about the live event stream yesterday, and the fact that they're talking about 3 gig a second, 5G, very smart capabilities. And we kind of said this example, which Tim was showing yesterday, where you can use augmented reality to highlight over and directly connect in to the switch. And, part of it is this is the real world. And, this is kind of today, is this metaverse kind of this augmentation of being able to bridge the gap with physical hardware, which you're seeing in the background with, schematics and information and debugging and open telemetry open APIs, to do debugging and, maybe push some of the chaos engineering, like, okay, Kafka, you do this kind of behavior, and there's a kind of a God mode which you can override and test those scenarios using the open API to pass the information. And then we stop these closed ecosystems where the idea, which I gave the example with PayPal, and is that somewhere between the Apple gateway and payment gateway and PayPal, my transaction got lost and got duplicated when I retried it. Part of it is if WorldPay and whatever payment gateway or Amex or MasterCard was passing the open API information about what their system was doing and whether or not there was a log, some kind of observability to kind of say, yeah, our systems bounced that message, you need to, refund this person, not continue your payment transaction. It's maybe opening the doors a little bit, and this open telemetry maybe sets the thing to say, I should be sharing information to enrich your observability and your ability to do effective site reliability testing. Do you think that's the way we need to be driving the industry?
I clearly do, Jonathan. I mean, what you have on the screen right now is reality. When I started working for Splunk a little over a year and a half ago, this is what I did my first 4-hour project on, was building this solution using this technology. So not only is it available today, it's been available for almost 2 years. It's interesting, the email that you had shared at the start of this panel, I was like, wow, 16,000 seconds, how long is that? So it's almost 4.5 hours. So to have that type of latency, there's bigger core problems, but that's immediately where my head went. And again, everything Wilson was saying, and Iran and I, we've all worked together for way too many years, but this is a much bigger problem. And what I will say, without this being a Splunk conversation, is data is being emitted from almost everything today, and if it's not being emitted, it's very easy to get to that data. So how is it that everything that's on your whiteboard, how do we pull that data in? How do we quickly make sense of it? I know Anna also has a lot of passion around the human side, so I think that's another critical element that we consider. But how is it that that's interpretable? But the fact that you're getting an email on something that's been going on for over 4.5 hours, I immediately fast forward to, how is it that we have something like, I call it automated orchestration, but what is it that can automatically fix that problem as it's happening, and I'm not waiting to get an email showing me that, oh, I've got something that's got a 4.5 hour latency built into it. That's not just network. In the cyber security realm that we all live in today, what else is going on? Is there a DDoS thing? Is there a man in the middle thing? Is there, did I lose a couple data centers? Is there something else going on in the world? So again, it's really, for me at least, it's what are all those different bits that are emitting data, and how can I quickly and easy get my head around that and find that needle in the haystack within 1 or 2 clicks, rather than the way I grew up, which was having 70, 80 people on a call for hours or for days, and everybody checking their little bits and reporting in. So again, I'll be quiet for a little bit here, but as I look at that problem, I go immediately to data, and how do I get to that needle in the haystack in 1 or 2 clicks?
By the way, with this whole 5G and a lot of this IoT systems that I've seen, the world is getting pushed to more of these, what they call a planetary file system. It's a real thing. That where it caches the information, and overnight it will pull in the data and store it locally, so that way if you don't have interconnection, an internet connection right there, you can at least work on the local information that you have. So I think that design pattern is going to be more and more, rather than totally dependent on a network being available, it's going to be pulling data in locally on there. What they call a fog network, right? Is that what we're calling it? It's a fog computing, FOG.
Yeah, and I think that's an interesting thing, Wilson, which I'm going to ask you a question on this. So obviously with the idea, and we've had this conversation around edge computing, in the sense of how much of this processing should be actually done in data centers with those latency round trips versus what could potentially be used on a compute. Now, they mentioned yesterday the machine learning engine which they've got in the new iPad, which was demonstrated, had 15 billion operations per second. You know, part of it is if we've got that amount of processing power, should really we be waiting for the app server or the layers behind that to be able to do the compute time when we can do it on an edge device that can potentially, like you said, from a fog perspective, could be caching some of those actions preemptively based on the type of transactions that you do, and then say, okay, well, these are the answers for all those questions just in case they ask them, but I can compute most of that. And I know Iran is nodding, so, you know, part of it is, you know, you think of Flutter, but you think, you know, beyond that and this idea of code snippets and maybe moving some of that processing activity to happen at the local area. And obviously the demo I gave for my session with the live stream on Apple was showing that the GPU on edge just wasn't working. You know, part of it is those kind of compute activities that we take for granted, and, you know, the browser rendering and all that time sending messages around, you know, the various different third-party APIs that you're sending information around your customer, you know, retention tool or whatever else you're building into your site, you know, or like what I kind of call class as bloatware. You know, how do we get to that point where, you know, you can pretty much be disconnected? You know, Wozniak said this year that when they started with Siri, you know, the idea was you could say it and ask it the time, and it would be able to work it out by the device. But by the time you get onto now, if there's no internet connectivity, it can't answer the time, it can't answer the weather. Those activities could have already been cached and therefore don't need an active connection. So why are we putting so much stress on infrastructure and making more noise and exhaust data as Todd kind of presented at the last event? You know, maybe we need to reduce that contact things and less streaming services which are consuming more of the network, and think about you know, network function virtualization, trying to reduce some of that network utilization and really try and, you know, streamline what we try and do. And like you said, 5G, you know, the first time I think I ever met Todd, he said, you know, having 10% load onto your network, 10% of mobile users onto your network will put 60% more load on your back end. And I just called him out and said, no chance. And then I realized it's because of the latency and it holding the processors, holding the virtual CPUs, which are holding real CPUs, and, you know, providing that kind of, you know, falling tornado that, like you said, Wilson, is queuing up behind. And actually, it's not the CPU that's the one that's the problem. It's the access to the disk, which you don't see because it's all, you know, hyper-threading and it's got limited visibility. And now we've made it even worse by putting them in, you know, into pods which are disposable and small and, you know, in theory resilient, but maybe not, you know, performant and reliably kind of designed to build like those ESB TIBCO kind of platforms of the past, which were built to be bomb-proof. The entire place can pull the plug out and we can still recover from it. It just feels like the internet went down a few weeks ago. Obviously, that was just Todd. But, you know, where are we going with this? And, you know, what's people's viewpoints? Anna, have you got a viewpoint to save the world?
Oh boy, I wish I did. But yeah, I think you touch on something really important, Jonathan, is that we have to do more edge computing, right? We have to take more advantage of what's going on at the edge instead of in the infrastructure. Obviously, there has to be a sync up at some point, but you know, no, there's no magic bullet. There's no silver bullet, right? Each company, certainly when I work with different companies, everyone is unique. Everyone has some special thing that's unique to them. And what's beautiful about what Splunk is doing, right, is you can pull the data that they have and help them make sense of it, right? It's not, you don't have to have standardize across companies. It's just what's going on in your company. And so being able to take advantage of some of these tools, right, and then putting them together, raising visibility, helps you start to take control of this sort of thing. And it, you know, I wish I had a silver bullet, but I don't.
Well, one thing to realize too, that Amazon's got a couple of tricks up its sleeve. You know, one is like the IoT camera, for example, that we got a couple of years ago. That's got AWS Greengrass running on it, which is basically a client to run the artificial intelligence models that's been created, that's been the learning that's gone down, and it comes down into like basically a program, which is they call a model, and that runs on the edge devices. So basically, it would be feeding. It won't be doing the training, which takes a lot of memory and CPUs. That could be done on the server, and the only thing that's comes back, that goes into this to the IoT device, whether it be a phone or wherever, would be actually the logic that is a result of the training that's done on the servers. And so that's one thing. The other one I'm really kind of curious about is, with all of your the devices from all of the Alexa stuff, is that they have a alternative network inside those, right? So it'll be interesting to see what really is going to happen, because now they're going to control the network in addition to your shopping cart. So it's going to be interesting to see. Now, in a populated area, that could be quite a, incentive for people, right? And so I don't know exactly what the usage is, but it's basically another internet that they would control and use.
If I can jump just for one moment, Jonathan, I think that your whiteboard isn't full enough. And I think what we are missing here, because we always talk about, technology, process, and obviously the developers and the testers. And what I see on the whiteboard is a lot of technology, okay? And what I'm missing here is, from a context perspective, how they all kind of talk together from a process perspective, and then how the different practitioners, because, Todd with Splunk and the others, they are obviously interested in the APM and the monitoring and the errors in production and the performance. And you just showed the performance engineering book, love it. But down below you have the single developers, you have the testers. How do you make sense out of all of these great technologies, by the way, when you're, let's take as an example a game, okay? A gaming application, and Apple was just in the news with Epic Games and Fortnite. So I don't think that we have players online right now, but these kind of games consist of millions of lines of code. Just the foundation of the game, and I work also within Perforce. I also do static code analysis. The Unreal Engine on which Epic Games are building Fortnite is like 10 million lines of code. Okay, so this gaming application running on an iPad or on a smartphone, this is the challenge here, okay? The end user experience when you're dealing with such a huge code base, security. Wilson, you talked about security, network performance, user experience, compatibility across different devices and operating systems. This is what I would like to tie, the full SDLC within all of these technologies. This is how you deliver top-notch technology. And I think today, Anna, you're saying you don't have the silver bullet. I agree. We don't have, the right workflow in between all of these great technologies and tools that really allow to deliver continuous software with high quality to the market. It's very hard, and the expectations of 5G and the others are obviously high. So I think that if we want to march towards the next level of innovation and support all the 5G connected cities and stuff like that, I think we have other fundamental blockers that I still see today, in reality, that we need to uncover and resolve, so we can really take advantage of the greater technologies that are out there. I think we are a bit behind on many more fundamental things. Sorry to be kind of the party pooper, but I see it day in and day out. There are so many issues around us, around quality, security, performance. We are simply not ready yet to observe all these kind of innovations.
So I'm gonna,
as OpsDev, we really have a lesson to learn from these 5-star hotels, right? And I tell my team, it's like, my hope, my goal is to be like a Ritz-Carlton. You walk in, they already know your name. You walk in, they say, oh, we already have this package available for you, and all those nice things that they do. And like a resort, right? You go in there and they basically know, okay, last time you came in here, you had Joanne as your massage, and she's ready for you at 2 o'clock, and that all of that is I think is really, as things get more complicated, the more that's going to be needed. Like a yeah.
So the kind of the Apple glasses, and I remember the lawsuit with Google glasses, which I did have, which was they used it in British Airways, and that exact example happened. A gentleman walked onto the plane. They said straight away identified him using facial recognition, said, your normal seat, and I use Seat Guru, so I know noise at a particular seat because I used to fly so much. But he gets his, champagne, his steak cooked exactly how he wants, and then he says, to his wife, how was your flight last week with us, to New York? And at that point, she realizes that it was his mistress that he brought with him, and on the last flight, and then suddenly the entire relationship breaks down, and there's data sovereignty and GDPR and what information should be available to a device as a data stream. But what I want to take back, minus that kind of push off, but I love the, we talk about Car2X, and we all saw what happened with Tesla quite recently, where loads of cars were going around the same corner and crashing. And part of it is, in essence, that's the real world observability. Things are happening. The desired result is car crashes. There's no centralized learning. Part of the whole reason why it's not Car2X is because it's not talking to any other cars. It's doing everything in isolation, right? And part of it is, if you took McLaren, they're optimizing everything in real time based on the engine. Part of it is this connected concept, is that things should be able to learn. Now, my question would be, from a dark canary perspective, what if you, within the digital twin of all the hardware that the device is doing, it's running simulations of possible permutations of deviations or AI learning that actually, as it goes around that corner, the first one crashes, the second one doesn't, because it's passed that information back up. And my use case to Tesla, but I never got to meet Elon, was you've wasted this really great capability that senses there's a pothole, and then the next Tesla that comes out changes the suspension to make it a better ride. What you should be doing is telling the local council that they've got a pothole there, mark the location, and let them fix it. And then once they fix it, they send a message back to Tesla to change the suspension. So part of it is, to me, this isolation's a problem. But what I really liked about kind of Wilson and things is actually that we're coming back to thick client and thin client. So if you think about pixel streaming with the Unreal Engine, right, they can stream a game, which we've had a long time, where they can literally stream the pixels and it takes no GPU and it's all done in the cloud. And then the opposite end is that everything within that engine can be run locally on the actual device and used as local GPU. So part of it is, we've gone all the way back round from terminal services and green screen, where the processing is all done on a mainframe and all the compute, and that's kind of cloud in essence. And then there's this kind of thin client, which is websites. And then we've got this idea of being able to do thick client and say, well, actually, let's move some of that compute workload over. Let's start using the ML capabilities. Let's start using some of the stuff that Tim was showing yesterday of, using computer vision and, real-time NLP and all this kind of great stuff. But actually, this is requiring the device to work. And of course, my section, I talked about there's no hardware without software. We're so used to HAL, the hardware abstraction layer, that part of it is we don't, when was the last time we did any hardware testing? Is the VMs extract it to a point where the container doesn't really ever access any real CPU or anything else. It's kind of, we're so good at abstracting things that we lose the focus of what's actually there and how everything fits together in the real world, which, I think that's the whole, from what I'm taking at the moment, is this digital world which we're building maybe isn't as resilient as we think it should be, and that we've got a lot of work, and the only way we can improve that is better data exchange. And of course, I joked about the metaverse, but the whole idea of exchanging data between systems, I hold up an AR augmented reality or the new Apple glasses that are coming out next year, and it interacts with my machine, or it interacts with my light and says it's been on for 20,000 hours and it's most likely going to die tomorrow, and it's ordered me one from Amazon, and it's good, my drone fits it. But part of it is that isn't that far away. How do we get to this point, and how do we start being open about, maybe we're a bit worried about the skeletons in our closet, where we say, actually, I don't want to show you my architecture because my company was built in 2016, and the architecture there has changed very much to what it is now. And if we'd have had the chance to build it again, we'd have done it right. But that aging architecture and what we've been talking about, and what Anna was talking about at the start about heritage sites, otherwise known as COBOL and Lisp and all that kind of, stuff that runs all the back end workload. When are we going to kind of be honest and say that actually, maybe our infrastructure isn't, it isn't a polished, Mercedes, that actually it's running on fumes, and maybe we need to invest more and not spend less on reducing of cost and automating human components out of the picture and keep the human in the loop. So I know that was a quite extended question, but does anybody want to jump in and kind of change the world?
One thing I will jump in to say is you draw this very complex picture, right? It is complicated, and the more you talk and the more we talk about all these things, the scarier it gets, right? Because we can't know everything, and we do everything that we can to bring as much knowledge together as we can, and we get Splunk and we get these other solutions, and you implement an orchestrator like we have, and you pull it all together. And the truth is, that each company needs to look at their priorities and take stock, listen to the input of the team, right? That says, hey guys, what about this security thing? Or what about this new regulation that's coming out? Everybody is able to put that in, because then you have to prioritize and you have to decide, where are we going to look next and what can we control next? Something I've encountered over and over in my career is there is so much I cannot control. And that's not just me, right? That is every company. You can only control so much. And so try not to be afraid of the big, scary mess, because it is a big, scary mess, right? Prioritize. What's the most important thing right now? If you're not GDPR compliant, that needs to be high priority, right? That's big, bad news right now. And so there's other things that are coming along the line, and you've got to prioritize, and you've got to decide what you're going to work on and keep a running list, because it's never going to end, right? And that's, I think, why there isn't a silver bullet, is because as we grow and as we change, we have to learn new things and add them to the list and prioritize and move forward and get the better tool that you need, or invest in the tool you have. Those, ASG was recently acquired by Rocket, and Rocket's line is make your legacy legendary, right? Take that legacy, make it legendary, and invest in it. The latest Z15s are amazing, right? They're not old and legacy. They're fantastic sports cars. So, it is about each business looking at what their problems are and prioritizing, and just get to work on it.
And talking about old and legacy, Paul's rejoined us for this.
Poor Paul.
I'm going to throttle you later. I've been listening in with interest, obviously, and it's not my field. It might have been about 7 years ago when I started looking at IoT, and it seemed to me, so the analogy or the scenario of walking into a hotel and the hotel knows everything about you is absolutely not something I want. So, given the choice, if I've got an app that says, whichever Hilton hotel in the planet you go to, they're going to know every detail, including your inside leg measurement. I don't want that. I just don't want that. But the thing is about a hotel, the example I used to use when I was talking about IoT in, I don't know, maybe 6 or 7 years ago it was, when it was just coming on the scene, was, okay, the hotel, when you go in there, every tablecloth, every knife, every fork, every glass, everything that is removable, stealable, the towels, everything that is removable will be tagged. and tracked and monitored. And the thing is, it's not necessarily about stopping people stealing it, although it might have an impact on that. It's that if you know where everything is, you don't need as much of it. And that seems such an obvious application of high volume assets that are obviously stolen there. Anyway, I don't think it's going to stop. I don't think the technology is going to stop us having all pervasive IoT devices, I mean, everywhere. And this is what the promise was several years ago. And it's just going to take longer, but it's going in that direction, is it not? I mean, what do you guys think? I mean, I hesitate to be confident that we're not all going to be wearing 57 devices on our body every time we get out of bed, and not even knowing we've got the damn things on. You know, so I've got a mechanical watch, and that's good enough for me. I don't think I've got any other devices on my body right now. So
I think, Paul, I love your insights. I think that there are things that we cannot control. You know, the thing that, you know, Wilson gave us, you know, when you go into the hotel. I can give an additional example, which is even more bothering or good, depending on where you're coming from. You know, just a few days ago, I'm getting an alert on my smartphone that the doors of my Toyota are still open. Okay, so the fact that my app is connected to my car, you know, it's a good and bad, right? It alerts me when something is wrong, right? My tires pressure is reduced. I forgot my doors unlocked, things like that. So the world behind around us becomes much smarter, okay, and it's all connected. So the phone knows everything about you when you enter a hotel, enter your car, you know, go outside in the city, and based on the location, it knows that you might want to go to the nearest Starbucks or Dunkin' Donuts or whatever based on your previous history. We cannot control that, okay? What we can do, okay, and by the way, right now, if you are familiar with the recent announcement from Google, so Google is now enforcing a new privacy policy starting Q1 2022. Each application, including the Toyota one, you know, will give you, once you install it, all of the information that is going to collect from you. Okay, Apple is partially doing it today, but Google is going to let you know, okay, we're going to use your contacts. We're going to use the location, the sensors, and they're also giving you the examples why they're using it. So you will know the use cases, and based on them, you can approve. You know, Paul, if you don't want them to know what you are doing when you go to the Hilton or Marriott, you can control it as an end user. And this is exactly what I'm saying, you know, the barrier between what you can control and the innovation that is around us. So there is a balance.
Yeah. But the thing is, though, the number of items of data that can be collected is in the hundreds. And that's the problem, because no one is going to sit there saying, no, 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 yes, yes, no, no, don't know. I mean, they'll say, give me another phone. I don't want this phone. I want a phone that doesn't put such pressure on me. And so I think that there'll be a reaction which says, I think someone will be able to market a phone that doesn't do any of that. I think that would sell like hotcakes. And I don't think it's because I'm older. I'm stuck talking about our age. But anyway. But what I'm saying is,
are you selling your BlackBerry?
Yes.
Kids who aren't kids anymore, but they're both, I think 30, 31, 32 now. Not on Facebook. Oh, my son isn't, you know, and he refuses to do any social media because he said it's complete and utter waste of his time. He says there's no value in it. And I mean, that's him, and he's maybe a bit odd and weird, but I think there'll be a reaction against all this. I really do think so.
Yeah.
I think it's like, I would buy a phone for I don't have young kids anymore, but if I did again in this era, I could say, do I want my 7-year-old carrying a phone for emergencies? I'd say maybe. Do I want that phone to be capable of accessing the internet and this, that, and the other? I think that would detract from their education, and it would also make them a target. I don't want that.
I think, you know, so we did a book on this, which I will quickly get here, which is the Digital Quality Handbook. And as I'm doing that, I'm going to just do a quick acknowledgement to our good friend Stuart Moncrief, who gave me these cards. What said we don't need to do any load testing. Ops problem now. So these are available, and it's all available at different things, which does actually have the connected car example in there, and also the Rainbow Road example as well, which I just tried to launch on my phone, but it needs to update. But so the last example which I gave at the last event was that I could still connect to a connected car which I'd just hired, but I registered the app on, and I could actually stop and start the car even though I wasn't driving it. And I think the part of the privacy component, and I kind of mentioned it, you've got this, you can actually open people's letterbox and say, hey Google, unlock my car, and then just steal the car. But part of it is there's new and new things coming down that are also new challenges, and data privacy and data sovereignty is definitely really important. And I think we are addressing that. And obviously with the great hack, the social dilemma, the list goes on. The coded bias, which the lady I actually worked with at MIT for the COVID vaccination, she does a section around how ML is now got this bias in it as well. That's going to have a massive effect on this based on the development and the human aspect of it. I think there's so much there which we could explore, and I know we've only got in essence 13 minutes, so I want to leverage this all-star super panel of experts to its maximum, and they're probably sitting there thinking, oh my gosh. But part of it is I think we've got some new challenges, we've got some new testing challenges. We definitely, with the AI landscape and ever-changing kind of it's right at the forefront now. And I think without any biases and data, we have to think about the ways that we're testing these systems, and we need to improve the confidence of these systems, and that is new patterns and that's new approaches. I think we've got some real leverage to be done within RPA, and leveraging RPA across the landscape for dev, for business, BPM, for intelligent process automation. I think we've got automation orchestration, which should also feed into that from the left-hand side, so people are building it. Todd's example of doing monitoring at code, which he did for a large investment bank in New York. Part of it is everything starts wrapping around these layers that build in confidence and I'm not going to use the word quality or resilience from day one. And I think part of it is we have to think about things slightly different. And I also, I, as much as I sound like I'm an advocate for new technology, is unproven, battle tested things, just because it's the newest and the shiniest doesn't mean that architectural design is what should be done. And Paul's example today, starting a brand new project with the biggest pharmaceutical company doing DevOps on Lisp, which is 60 years old. Part of it is revitalize the old, actually support the heritage, support and renew and not throw away. Once you've got that business abstraction into it and you've got those smarts, part of it is how do we leverage that within this new brave future of connected car, IoT, or whatever else device it is, and how do we create insights? I give the example, but I've got this band which I bought from Amazon for $30, and you might not be able to see, but in the corner it tells me my stress level. And once my stress level gets over a point, I genuinely slow down on what I'm doing. This doesn't tell me my stress. And I did my example today where I'm doing 4 meetings in 4 different time zones simultaneously. So I'm my electrical processors are time slicing each one of the conversations that are happening. And I'm, burning myself out in this new digital world. And part of it is we need that insight to give us help that tells us, information, not information overload. And we also don't need to be proxies. We don't need data coming in email format and just passing it on to somebody else. We have to enrich it. We have to add value to it, which is kind of what Anna kind of said. That's why Cortana should automatically read your emails and tell you what you need to do. Leave the digital grind to tools and technologies that can help you, and then focus on the human aspect and how we have to look at this in fresh new eyes and apply new pioneering approaches that are going to lay the foundations for this brave new world. And that's where I think, you know, this panel definitely is, you know, at the forefront of that. And I think we've got to blend the old with the new, and you know, just like red wine, it just gets better with age. You know, let's start embracing legacy and make it legendary, but also legacy is your legacy. So you know, part of it is we need to start not always needing the shiny new, you know, tool. We need to do better with what we've got.
Yeah, along those lines, one of the GDPR European standards is to have explainable artificial intelligence and machine learning. I think that's a great thing because they need to, any company, rather than saying, oh yeah, we just made this decision about, let's say your, because they used to have I think they still do, a court system used to have this unexplained AI that they would then create sentences. You know, I mean, I'm talking about like hand out how many years you're going to serve in jail based on this quote unquote AI that really didn't have any exposed logic to it. And so that's a very dangerous thing. And so as a result, the systems I think now needs to be built to where it's not just a set of rules that's invisible, but yeah, exactly. So you can have a explainable situation. So a lot of companies do now is taking the training and and putting that into like a rules or some kind of a rule system that could be adjusted. It could be, you know, that could be used to expose exactly what the logic was, you know, that's created. What's that?
We're being playful now, don't worry.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think one of the things that struck me, again, about 3 years ago, when I saw my first experience of someone using AI or machine learning rather than AI to help with the generation of test cases in a tool. I spoke to the CTO who said, interestingly, when they tried to sell it, they could sell it, but then what would happen is when they started using it, the user said, well, how can we trust this? And it wasn't explainable. And the thing is, I think what will happen is people will say, or salespeople, let's say, will offer the tool and say, it's got AI in it. Oh, shiny new thing. Okay, I'll have it. How does it work? Oh, it's all too scientific. It's, you know, it's a black art. I can't ever understand it. And then we get into a position where we buy technology without any notion of knowledge rather than faith. And we're doing things on faith. And that is not a safe place to be. You know, it's never got us anywhere in the past. And it's got us into some very dark places in the past. I don't want to get into that one. but that's my worry, is that we're surrounded by technology that we don't actually believe we can ever understand. And I don't think that's a good place to be.
No. And to add on to that, and I kind of want to build on what Wilson said, is you know, Wozniak said the exact same thing at a recent keynote that he did, and he kind of said, you know, explainable AI is essential, right? And I think part of it is we've kind of moved into this, like I said, abstraction or simplification of it, and like, you know, Tim said yesterday, he said 80% faster than last time and 20% more battery, and you know, I get the highlight kind of viewpoint of the 80% more GPU, but for 95% of the users, that's never going to be used. You know, part of it is back to kind of what Anna was kind of saying at the start around value stream, mapping and management, is that it's tangible differences to what that actually means. And the example we had with the system failing over is, does it really add any benefit telling us that it's been down for 4.5 hours when really what we needed is an alert with a kind of a risk profile of what that meant, what the impact could be, you know, even the self-healing aspect of it happening before it needs to, so that we can get to that point where, you know, we don't have these kind of problems. And also, you know, I think part of it is this, we've also kind of abstracted down to specific requirements. If you think about specification, by example, by Goico, you know, the idea, or Elizabeth Hendrickson with acceptance test driven development, is such a micro level that it doesn't actually scale. It doesn't have a goal, you know, at a level where it's saying this, you know, insurance platform will make, you know, it 20% more efficient for all our users, and therefore there'll be 40% less complaints and 30% things, and we would track that all the way through to the 3 years where we've committed to it, or Paul's example, 27 years of decommissioning mainframe systems. But we track those exec scorecard cascading KPIs to the point that we validate the hypothesis, and we've proven the hypothesis at the start based on we expect a 20% efficiency increase, and we can validate it at the end. And I don't think we do. I think we validate that the field can take an alphanumeric value, and that isn't anything to do with what we're trying to do as far as behavior change, win the hearts and minds of our, of consumers, and make it so that actually, we engage with people in digital interactions and experiences that are beneficial to that person. And Paul, being a grumpy old man, his experience and how technology presents itself is different to how it presents it to me. Everyone's an individual, but we treat everybody with the same app, with the same front end, no matter who it is. We have no understanding of the emotional state that they are in, and we need to be able to explain why we're doing these things, why we're using the technology, and what that actually means for people and digital citizens. And I think that is the turning point. What we've got here is that we're trying to abstract things to a level that we can explain why we're doing it, not in a whole stack of we're using GraphQL to solve, create knowledge graphs so that we can, migrate our data warehousing. Let's get rid of the technology for a second. Paul says it probably better than I do, but we're good at throwing technology for human problems. Let's now get it so that it's explainable in human terms, that everybody understands within the organization what they're trying to change. So, we've only got a few more minutes, and then Anna's bonus session is going to come on. But, can we have some parting words from each one of you about the future? And I'm going to start with Wilson.
Well, this didn't come up, but I think that, Paul, you're going to be happy that in the future, because I've interacted with a lot of these kids, basically, from our viewpoint, doing blockchain, and that is a totally user control type of situation, rather than going through a government or a large company like Google. Or I think the future is good for these planetary file system, Ethereum, and it's totally disconnected from a central power, which is really what they call a Web 3.0, what they call it, Web 3. So that I think would be, I think you'll like that, in terms of, individual freedom on there. So, so if we live long enough, then we'll be able to see it. Yeah. By the way, one thing I want to do is to have a shout out to the Inspiration 4 crew going up into space this evening, and so I wish them well. We'll be watching the Netflix show, if you miss it, it goes through, and I think it's an exciting time for humanity that, that regular people, imperfect people, will have a chance to get up into space. And they'll be flying above the Hubble space station, the Hubble and the space station, 300 some miles up in space. So for 3 days, where they'll be doing experiments and the like. So I wish them well.
I must admit, I'm going to pass it over to Iran in a second, but one of my most exciting, or to Todd, one of my most exciting patents I ever read was the interplanetary protocol written by Google about 10 years ago about how sending data exchange into different planets. Now, I can't wait for that to also be implemented. So talking about boldly going where no man, woman, or AI has ever gone before. Todd, do you have any final words?
I do. So I know one of the bits that I've often heard you speak about, Jonathan, has been RPA. And so I guess, one of the pieces that new shiny technology, right? But according to Ernst & Young, 30 to 50% of a failure rate on RPA projects. And then when I just heard Wilson talking about blockchain, I had to kind of do a quick Google because I was trying to remember the most recent, which was the 11th of August, 2021, a $600 million US cryptocurrency heist. And again, that all being done, brought to us by blockchain site Poly Network. So
yeah, but they got the money back. So
well, they only gave 200 million back, which I'm still asking. I'm sorry, 220 million back, which I'm still asking the question: why would you give, a third of it back after you lift it? You're going to kind of leave more breadcrumbs. But I think, not only do I think about things like RPA, but also SecOps. And that's probably a whole nother conversation. But I think, kind of what's next and what are we looking at in the future? And again, Wilson, just kind of building on the bit that you're talking about, I see plenty more opportunities. I know I shared in the notes, there was also a wearables that was 2 days ago, 60 million records were exposed just from these wearable tracking. So everything that we're showing on our wrists, to Paul's point, like that's 60 million records that were exposed. What does this mean from a security operations perspective?
And I can give a great example there before I hand it over to Iran, the king of this. But there's a great example with Fitbit, which is now Google, where the information was leaked, but it also showed, because the army was giving them wearables, it actually showed the GPS locations of all the bases in all the different countries, because it was public information. And I think part of it is these are real challenges that are happening right now, and I think we've all got to step in and think about those edge cases that maybe we never thought about before, or how this data could be used for good and evil. And I know Google have an anti-evil team, but maybe we need to be those whistleblowers within our organization to say, stop using test data, production data in test. We need to grow up and take some responsibility for our, for testing, and not be afraid to potentially, blow the whistle if need be. So, Iran, back to whistleblowing. What do you want to add in at the end?
I'll connect. I can talk a lot about everything, because great stuff here. But I think that if we tie back to the legacy and new technology, I would say just one thing about that. Adoption takes time. And what we see over the past 2 decades, Paul, you are not the only old guy in this forum. I share the same age, I guess. So we have learned that if you do not allow new technology to play nicely with legacy technology, you simply fail. Okay, and 5G and all the others, and RPA and AI and machine learning, they are evolving. Obviously, AI and machine learning are great tools to accelerate software development and testing, but they are specific tools solving specific problems in the pipeline, should work actually with the legacy and other technologies. I need to take a screenshot of Jonathan's whiteboard. It's amazing, but not everything that was marked on the whiteboard uses AI and machine learning, and these are all great technologies. So the trick, or the key for success here is to adopt new technologies as they play and actually integrate nicely to the legacy technologies, actually making us better developers, better testers. So that's, in my mind, the legacy versus kind of innovation relationship.
Thanks, Iran. And finally, penultimately, to Anna. Well, actually, I'm going to let Anna be last, because then I can just go straight into a video. So, Paul, tell us how you're going to change.
I wanted to say something about blockchain very briefly, but there's a statistic I saw probably 6 months ago. I can't remember the detail of it now, but it showed the energy consumption of blockchain compared with the energy consumption of countries. And I can't remember which country it was, but in order of consumption, with, I guess, I'm imagining the US is top, I don't know, but blockchain is creeping up that list. And if we are concerned about climate change, I think this is the wrong solution. Now, I know a lot of the energy used is geothermal and so on and so forth, but I think we should be putting it to a different purpose than making millionaires richer. I don't think that's the right use of the resources we've got on our planet. And there'll be a reaction to that. Eventually,
just because you're not a millionaire,
a better solution, blockchain will just disappear overnight, because it's the wrong solution. It's not a solution we need.
And so I'm going to echo that as well, because actually the call that I'm jumping on now, which I'll send a photo in a minute, is actually with Hawaii SDGs, the Sustainable Development Group, and I'm building a dashboard to map individuals and businesses to their 16-point SDG goals, right? And I think this is a real interesting one because part of the reason why I'm talking with the Aloha Plus dashboard people today is that because of the COVID situation, more people at Hawaii Air are flying more people over at half the cost, which you'll probably see in the US at the moment. But because they're then getting ill in Hawaii, actually it's putting a strain on the resource infrastructure and the amount of beds. So actually, it's having a detrimental effect, but also it's having a sustainability problem where, tourists are, coming in, causing, chaos. And, I think part of it is we need to be more responsible, and we need to be looking at these these social innovation projects and really think about how do we blend that into what we're doing. We talk about becoming carbon neutral and reducing our footprint, and then we push a whole stack of cloud compute. I was shocked when I went to, first time I've ever been to an Amazon data, the standalone units, which they just plumb in with water and power. And I spoke to the seller, so well, what happens when you get systemic failure and hardware failure? They say, oh, we swap it out about 30%. So part of it is you're thinking there's 30% still on using power, which isn't creating any compute value, which is having a carbon footprint effect, and also your data centers 30% less powerful. So part of it is, we really need to get better at this. And, I'm not saying it's hardware, I'm not saying it's software, but I think, if we are going to make a change together, we have to think of all these dimensions. And with that, finally, that beautiful message and the fact that I am just going to go and map some SDGs, I'm going to hand it over to Anna to finish us off and go into her session, which is a bonus session. And obviously after that, the event will finish. And I'd like to thank, obviously, Wilson, Todd, Iran, Paul, and Anna for this final session and just, how inspirational it is. So thanks so much, guys and ladies, and AIs, which we had the first ever AI speaker conference, which didn't go down that well. We actually had quite a lot of resistance of why is an AI doing the session and why isn't the person doing it? And, I was really interested that we did that. And I think we've broken some new ground there. So, fantastic. And thanks to everybody who was involved. And of course, those people are watching this on demand now. So I'm going to hand over to Anna, and a massive thank you from everybody at the festival's conferences.
Yes, definitely. Thank you, everybody. And I would just say that, I think Iran's touched on it, that we've got to be able to connect all that new and shiny to the legacy and the heritage that we have. And really, that's what our goal is, and what ASG we focus on is helping our customers make those connections and encouraging them to break down their silos so that they can connect the new and shiny to their heritage systems. And so if you're interested in my bonus session, we go into a little bit more about what Enterprise Orchestrator does to help tie those things together for you. So thank you, Jonathan. Thank you, everybody else. This has been great.